Good morning and welcome to your favorite Friday morning podcast, Conversation with Buddy, brought to you by The Rec, way more than a bowling alley. And by the way, we say way more than a bowling alley because it is. So we do ministry here. We have a few ministries going on here, but one of them is Valor Mentoring, where we mentor men. And the main thing that I love doing is to, three things: encourage men, challenge men, and really to love on them, no matter what journey they're on. So if you like to be a part of that, you want to learn more about that, come on down to the Rec, and we'll take you on a tour, and we'll tell you more details about what we do. Today, though, we have a special guest. His name is Chris Haley. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, good morning. Good morning.
Man, it's good to have you, dude.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, so you're on Facebook, and you said, hey, I'd love to be on a podcast. And
Yeah.
if you guys mentioned my name and probably a few others, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But then Matt Macera introduced us through a text. And so, man, I love that dude.
He's such a good dude.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I've known him for like 8 years. And he's insane in a good way.
You know? He's insane in a good way. I would agree on that, man. So, well, we're going to talk about you and hear all about you and get to know who you are and what's Black Label Marketing and your ministry, just kind of everything you're doing.
Yeah, let's go.
So let me introduce you first, and then we'll dive into the deep stuff. So, first of all, you say you're a girl dad.
Yes,
how many girls do you have?
3.
Dude, I've got 2. You got 3. We'll have to talk more often. The second thing is you're a husband. How long have you guys been married?
We've been married 2 years.
2 years.
Yep.
So congrats. You're a pastor, a church planner, and you say South Salem 2025.
Yeah.
Is that you go to church, but you're planting a church for next year?
Yep. Yeah, we're planting a church next year. Me and one of my friends, we're going to be the co-lead pastors.
Nice.
And we are here to impact the city.
Yeah. Who's your other pastor?
John David.
David.
Yeah, Faded Ink. He's the owner of
Okay.
Faded Ink. Yep.
Would you introduce me to him through a text this morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Awesome. You're a business owner of Black Label Marketing LLC. You're a cold brew coffee addict. If I were a color, it would be maroon.
Heck yeah.
And what do you mean?
I love maroon. It's just it's a color that it accents really well with everything.
Yeah.
It looks good. It's fresh, but it's not like too bright. It's kind of dark, but still like just looks good.
Looks
you
good.
know? It was that was the color I wore at my wedding, was all maroon. So
You have to share some of those pictures. I'd love to see them.
Yeah.
Okay. And maroon probably looks good on you, man.
Heck yeah.
That's awesome. Well, hey, we're going to dive in a little bit and really go over those things that you talked about. I like to start out really getting to know who Chris is. Like, where were you born? You know, how did your parents impact you to be who you are today? Let's just start there. Then we'll just dive in deeper. You know, we'll talk about marriage, you know, being a girl dad. I'm a girl dad. So,
Yeah.
And then we're also going to talk about weight loss.
Yeah.
So you said you lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I need to lose weight. I don't know about any of you on here, but I need to lose weight. I need to know how you did it. You know, what motivated you, what inspired you, and how'd you do it? So
Yeah.
let's start from the beginning though. Where'd you grow up? Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born in Northern California.
Okay.
It's a town called Fairfield. Not a lot of people know where that is. It's by Vacaville. It's like 15 minutes away from Vacaville, California.
Okay.
And I was born in Fairfield, but I lived in Dixon. And so it was a really small farming town. It's known in California for having the oldest Mayfair. And so that's where I grew up.
Nice.
I grew up in a small family. My dad actually has 7 brothers and sisters. My mom had 3 sisters and a brother. And so, it is a good time. My mom's side of the family was really close. My dad's side of the family is all kind of spread out over the U.S. So we got more time to be with my mom and her family. And so they were instrumental especially my grandma was instrumental in me growing up and becoming who I am.
So lots of cousins probably.
Lots of cousins on my dad's side.
Yeah.
I still don't know all of them.
Right.
There's too many to know. So
That's
it's like
cool.
everybody had kids, and their kids now have kids, and we're.
But you're used to being around family, and is that really important to you? Family?
Super important to me.
Okay.
I actually, so my dad's side of the family wasn't around a lot growing up. We had a family reunion every year, every 2 years. But that was the most I had. My mom's side of the family is a little bit smaller, but I knew when I got married, I was like, man, God, please bring me somebody who has a big family. And I married into a massive family.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll get there.
Yeah.
How'd your mom and dad impact you to make you who you are today?
Yeah, my parents, man, that was my parents are gifted in so many ways. Growing up, I would say my growing up wasn't great. My dad was an alcoholic, super abusive, emotionally, mentally, physically, to my mom and myself.
Really?
Yeah. And my mom has a servant's heart. She loves people, loves to serve people, and loves to be around people. And my dad is the exact opposite. He was a pilot with American Airlines, so he was absent a lot. He'd be gone for 7 days, home for 3 or 4 days, and then gone another. And it was a little rough for me. I never felt like my dad was around, but when he was around, it was like he was choosing the bottle over spending time with me, and so that was a hard transition for me. But being on the other side of that, now being older and being able to look back, like my dad also has a heart to help people. My dad now, he is helping all of his neighbors build things. He used to own a cabinet shop when he was a kid. His dad owned one growing up. And so he's really talented with working with wood and building. He just has an eye for it. He can look at something and be like, this is the dimensions. This is what you need to do. This is how we need to like solve this problem. And I've realized that I have that analytical brain of being able to separate things and be like, oh, this is the problem. This is how we solve that. Let's make these steps to move forward to do that. As well as I love people well. My mom taught me that, to love people well and to serve people.
It sounds like you got the best of both.
I think so.
No parent's perfect, right? I mean, I'm a parent, you're a parent, we're not perfect, but love does conquer all.
Come on.
But I love that your mom loved to serve people and love people. I mean, it really isn't that what we're called to do anyways?
Absolutely.
Go love on people.
Yeah.
But, to be a business owner, which you are, you have the analytical mind. We talked about that over coffee a couple days ago, like how you like the process or the strategy. And most people aren't gifted that way. At least I'm not. So I like hanging around guys like you that can help me figure things out.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And I think it's cool that neither one of my parents were believers when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And so to learn those skills and to see how God was already weaving those things in my life before I even knew him or before my mom even knew him. My dad's still not a believer. My mom actually came to faith probably about 6 years ago. Yeah. We had a time where my mom and I were actually separated and we weren't talking. And I had a friend that was like, hey, you should come and play disc golf with me. And I was like, dude, let's do it. He's like, but first, why don't you go to church with me?
Who's your friend?
And so his name is Will.
Local guy?
Yeah, he's a local guy. Super cool dude. Right. He was drumming for a church. And he's like, hey, just come with me and then we'll go out and play at this course. My mom was living in Dallas at this time. And I walk into this church.
This was 6 years ago.
6 years ago, yep. I walk into this church. And it was like my Sunday off. Finally had a Sunday off. I was like, cool, I'm just going to relax. And like, I wasn't planning on going to church. And I walk in this church and the pastor gives a really great message. He does an altar call at the end. And I like look over to the left and I see my mom. And she like stood up, like gave her life to Christ. And then the next week she got baptized. And I was just like, man, I had no idea she was going to church, none of that. It was a wild, full circle moment of something that I had been praying for years, is what I would consider being a first generation believer in my family. Yeah. My great grandpa was a Southern Baptist preacher, but that's as far as it went in my family. No one else. Like I never grew up in knowing what church was. I mean, my mom told me as a kid, she baptized me in a Catholic church because she was afraid that demons were going to get me. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. So back up a little bit. When did you come to know Christ, and what age? How old are you right now, and what age were you?
So I'm 31.
Okay.
And so when I was 17, I was going to Salem Academy Christian. Yeah. And I was dating this girl, and her dad had actually helped build the YWAM's rope course when it was around. Yeah. And she had told me, she was like, hey, if you want to continue dating me, you need to go to church with me. And I was like, well, that's dumb. I don't want to do that. Like I was focused on playing basketball. That was it. That was my life. Like I'm going to go play in college and then I'm going to go be an anesthesiologist. That's what I wanted to do with my life. I was set. Nothing's going to change that. But I was like, you know what? After months of her trying to convince me, I'm like, Easter's coming around. I'm going to go ahead and like, I'll just go to church on Easter because everyone goes to church on Easter, right? Yeah. Like whatever. So I walk in the doors of Church on the Hill North Campus, and the worship team is playing Came to My Rescue by Hillsong. And during that song, I just fell apart. fell apart. I couldn't tell you why. I knew that something in my life wasn't right, and I wasn't happy. I was dealing with my parents' divorce. I was struggling with some things mentally. I was stuck in some addictions, and I was just like, man, I can't stay this way. The teaching pastor came over to me, and he was like, hey, it's evident God is doing something on your life, and you have two options. You can either stay the same, or you can make a decision that will forever change your life. And I knew I couldn't stay the same. So from that second, I accepted Christ, and my life literally completely changed, and for the better. And there are still rough seasons, right? Every believer has a testimony and rough seasons we go through. But man, my life, I never thought I would be here doing what I'm doing and even planting a church. I went back to, when I was interning, I went back to Salem Academy, and my youth pastor at the time was giving a message at one of the chapels. And one of my old teachers was like, wait, you're going to become a pastor? And I was like, I know, it's crazy. Like, God saves people still. It's wild. It was wild. She just couldn't believe the change in me. Not that I was a bad kid. Sure. I just, my morals and values weren't aligned with anything Christ-centered, even though I was going to a Christian school,
My question to you is, how'd you get to Salem Academy though? Christian school, not a Christian. Was it your dad, your mom that put you there, or how'd you get there?
So I was playing basketball at West Salem High School, and I had some stuff go on with some of the team, and I decided that West Salem wasn't the best fit for me, and I had been playing on a tournament team with some guys from Salem Academy, and so they had 6 graduating seniors, and I knew as a junior, I was like, I can go on there and be in varsity, and easy. So I transferred, and I had a whole interview that I had to do in order to get into the school. And I remember sitting there in front of the principal at the time, and he was asking me questions about faith. And I was like, yeah, the Bible, it's good. And if you read it and believe it and, follow it, it's going to be great. I left that interview thinking that I did absolutely amazing, that I was like, oh man, I crushed that. Like, there's no way they're not going to accept me. And looking back on it now, I'm like, they totally saw right through me. But God, they still chose to let me into the school. And because of that, I'm saved today. I got to meet Jesus, and now I get to introduce other people to him.
Yeah.
So
what a great story, man. Yeah. It's funny how God works, and whatever happened at West Salem High School, a brokenness caused you to go to a different school, but God always has the final say. Mm-hmm. So what a great story. So then God allows you to show up at a church on a perfect day to see your mom accept Christ and get baptized. Wow.
Yeah.
What a joy.
Full circle.
So your relationship with your mom today is...
Oh, it's great.
It's great.
Yeah.
How about with your dad, though?
Yeah, my dad has never really been a dad. I don't think he knows how to really be a dad. But I do know that if I need something, if I need something built, I can call him. I literally called him the other day, and I was like, hey, I need a shelf for this armoire that I have that I'm using as a pantry. I'm not good with tools. He's great at it. Tools are not my thing. It's not me. But I called him and I was like, hey, this is the dimensions. And he was like, cool, let me come take a look at it. And he built the shelf, and I picked it up yesterday.
No kidding.
Yeah. And so he is great at things like that. But as far as being in my life actively and seeking a relationship with me, that's just, he doesn't know how. And he kind of almost refuses to do it. More so, if you need me, I'm here. You just call me.
Yeah.
We don't have a bad relationship. I walked through a whole bunch of forgiveness with him.
Sure.
A lot of that stuff that I carried as a kid was unforgiveness towards him. And I realized that one day that I had to let that go. And he's not perfect. And I can't hold him to a standard that he doesn't know, because he can't meet that.
Man, that word right there, you cannot hold him to a standard that he does not know. Mm-hmm. If he did know, I think he would perform differently.
Absolutely.
And he just doesn't know.
Yep.
But you still love him anyway.
Come on.
And he's watching you, whether you know it or not. He's secretly going, hey, why is Chris joyful? There's a light that shines through you that just keep praying.
Yeah. I had invited him, when I was at my last church, I had invited him to come and see me speak. And he actually showed up.
He saw you speak.
He saw me speak. And he didn't say anything about the message, but the only thing he said to me was, I now understand why you do this. And that was it. And I was like, I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means,
sweet.
but that sounded good.
Yeah.
Okay. What year was that? How many years?
That was probably about, let's say I've been married for it's probably about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm.
So he saw you speak at a church. Mm-hmm. So you gave a message.
Yep.
Was the gospel message in that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, you know what? I'm believing that he will come to faith.
Me too. Me
cool.
too.
Okay, so you go to Salem Academy. Basketball is your sport.
Absolutely.
Do you play any other sports?
Disc golf. I played football, and then I dabbled a little bit in golf, but I'm horrible at it.
Hey, golf was golf, man.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get better.
Okay.
I reached out to a buddy that is an amazing golfer, and I was like, hey, who can I take lessons with? Because I feel like I should get good at this.
Well, hey, if you ever want to go golfing, the invite is open. We golf on Wednesdays, like this next Wednesday.
Yeah.
We golf about 4 o'clock. We golf 9 holes. If you ever want to come join us, come
Sweet.
join us. Golf lessons. There's a guy at Salem Golf Club. His name's Alan. He'd be a great guy to go see.
Awesome.
You can take lessons in 15-minute increments, and so.
Oh, okay.
You can do an hour, but he goes, don't do that. Just work on one thing, 15 minutes, and then it's awesome. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, the invite's open. We used to, for years, we had just the same 4 guys that go every week, and then all of a sudden we'd bring in other guys, so we'd have to create 2 tea times. So we always have 2 tea times, and back to back. So then we have dinner afterwards. So
that's
it's
awesome.
really a cool time. So
Yeah.
okay, so you get through high school. Do you go to college?
I spent a little time at Corbin and absolutely hated it.
Tell me.
And then was like, yeah, I'm done with this. I felt like I didn't have direction for my life. I thought I knew what I wanted. And it just felt like it was really hard, and my mind couldn't wrap around some of the things to be an anesthesiologist. And now being on the other side, I'm like, oh, that's because that's not where God wanted me to be. But yeah, I went to Corbin, and I felt like I was being told I had to believe this way. Mm-hmm. And I was always asking more questions like, well, why? Why do we think this? And I see you can say that, but I don't see God's heart in what you're saying. Like, I feel like Scripture is saying something different, and I got yelled at so many times for bringing some of those discussions up. Well, no, this is just what we believe. And I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of I'm just going to pull away for a little bit. And I actually never finished college.
Yeah.
I have like 2 more classes before I hit like an associate's.
Yeah.
And then I am working currently right now to get my credentials through the Assembly of God. I have 2 classes left to get my credentialing, but I've been in ministry for almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
And so,
honestly, I mean, college or no college doesn't define who you are.
Yep.
Right? The fact that you're serving the Lord and doing ministry, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's the thing that you've probably been called to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was talking with a buddy yesterday, and he was very like, man, I just don't understand like why people say I need to go to school. And so we had this conversation, and I was like, man, I think school is great, especially if you're going to ministry. I think it's great to be into school and know how to study Scripture and know how to read it in the right context, right? Knowing who wrote it, why they wrote it, what was the time period, what's the culture, kind of having an overview of that really helps you see the things I think we miss in Scripture if we don't have that. Yeah. But I also have friends that, went to school, and they came out and they were ready to run a youth ministry, and they had all these plans, and they were like, oh yeah, we're going to do all these things. And I had already been running a youth ministry for like 6 years. And I was like, hey, cultures, that's not going to work. Like, the culture is going to eat your strategy for breakfast. Like, get to know where you are before you decide what you're going to do. And so I had that friend come back to me like 6 months later and was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm like, dude, time spent is relationship built. Focus on spending time with your people first, man. And then all the other things will fall into place.
The quote, man, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know where that quote came from, but that's a good one.
Yeah, honestly, I heard it somewhere, and it's just been one of those. That and the time spent as relationship built are like 2 quotes that I really, really focus on. And it's so true.
Well, after meeting with you for coffee the other day, I can tell your heart's in it. Like, there's no manipulation. There's no ulterior motive. You're pure. Your desire is to really edify people and help people in every way. So that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
I love that.
Thank you.
Okay, so after, quasi going to Corbin, what was your first job, and then what led you to where you're at today, and
Yeah.
Well, then we'll get to marriage.
Yeah. So let's see. After high school, I was working at Nike.
Yeah.
And I was doing dual Nike and Dutch Bros. And so I was in Woodburn 3 days a week and then at Nike campus 2 days a week. And so I was processing the fall, winter, and spring lines of footwear. I am a Jordan shoe guy through and through. I'm even wearing a pair right now.
Yeah.
And so I'm all about it.
Yeah.
But I was doing that, and then I was like, man, this isn't fulfilling something inside of me. And so I started looking around at where could I impact youth? And at that time, I was leading Young Life, and I was like, man, my heart really is for youth ministry. And so where can I impact the most amount of people? And so I saw there was an opening at the Boys and Girls Club. So I was like, oh, you know what? Let me see if I can get a job at the Boys and Girls Club. So I went through this interview process, got it, and I became like the coordinator for one of the branches for Boys and Girls Club here. Super awesome time there. Learned some great things. The guy that I had mentioned earlier, Will, his wife Dana was my boss, and that's how I met Will. That introduced me to that church where my mom got saved. So crazy story there. Like God was already ordaining that whole relationship there. So then from there, I wasn't making enough money, and I was like, man, I really need to do something different. And one of the guys that I had worked with that left Boys and Girls Club was like, hey, I'm working at Christian Community Placement Center. You should come and apply. And I was like, well, what's this place? And so essentially what they did was it was a transitional facility for boys that had just been released from corrections, and they were transitioning them back into society. And so I was like, oh man, that sounds like a lot of fun, like taking the misfits of society, those that have made some mistakes, and they're like the outcasts, right? And they're trying to transition, and how do I live in society when I've been in a jail setting for a long time? And so I was like, dude, that sounds like where I want to be. So I started working there, and I was there for 5 years. And that's where I met one of my friends, Luis, who introduced me to the church that I ended up attending for 8 years. And I was the youth pastor and assistant pastor at before my wife and I left about 1.5 years ago. And that was an amazing time. During that time at Christian Community Placement Center, they recently changed their name to Connections 365, but at Christian Community Placement Center, the kids used to call me Jesus Chris, because everything I talked about was gospel centered. I ended up baptizing a couple of the kids. Some of the kids got saved, and before they would leave and transition back into society, I would take them and we would go like on a drive, or we would go on a walk, and I would just be like, hey, you're entering into a new station of life. And honestly, I would just tell them the gospel. I didn't know if I was supposed to do that or not, but I was doing it because I knew that they needed hope, and they needed a savior. And the only thing that was going to set them free from what they were struggling with is Jesus. And so I was like, I'm not going to miss the opportunity to give you what you're asking for. So that led me there. And then from there, I was like, where did I go after that? Christian Community Placement Center. I went to Albertina Kerr, and I was helping people who experience disabilities find jobs in the community. And Albertina Kerr had brought a program down from Portland. The city of Salem got sued a while back for not being disability friendly. So they brought a program called Project Search in. And so I was one of the core team that founded that Project Search internship with the city of Salem. So I did that for about a year and a half. And then during COVID happened, and then everything just shifted, and the job became something that I couldn't maintain and we couldn't do. So we parted ways. And then I ended up working for Done Right Plumbing and Drain. And that is where the marketing story began for me. And so Done Right, they were looking to get their marketing handled. There were some things that they were paying money to certain people to do things, and they weren't producing results. And so I kind of came in and like, hey, let's look at your budget. Let's look at what we're doing, and let's figure some things out and get organized. And I fell in love with marketing. And I had been doing various forms of marketing over the years. When I was 15, I was playing basketball at the Hoop in South Salem, and the owners there, they were like, hey, you're young. Can you like help us make flyers and do that kind of stuff? And so I kind of had a little bit of an idea of what to do in a couple areas, but I spent a lot of time on YouTube learning and listening to so many different people. And then my boss was like, hey, I really want to get this out to them, get this promotion that we're doing out to a whole bunch of people. How do we do that? And I was like, honestly, I think Facebook is going to be the cheapest and most effective way. And so I put together an ad for a no-fee November. We ran that ad with $150, and the return of that ad was $20,000 in like 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And that I was like, okay, I think I can make this into like a legit job.
Yeah.
I'm watching these other marketing agencies, some in town, some out of town, that are over promising and under delivering. And so I was like, I think I can bring some honesty and transparency back to the like marketing world.
Yeah.
And I love service-based businesses. And so that's kind of where Black Label Marketing really got its start, where I was like, man, I think I could do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I jumped into Black Label, still being a full-time pastor and doing Black Label, and still working at Done Right. And my brother-in-law, he's the owner of Done Right Plumbing and Drain. He and I had a conversation, and he was essentially just like, hey, we're going to part ways because I want you to run. I want you to run with your dream. And I'm so thankful for that. He gave me a nice severance package, and it sustained me for a couple months while I could get my business off the ground. And we got it off the ground, and we're running strong. I've been going full time since June of last year, and I'm just seeing increase every time. And it's all the Lord. I use that. My job at Black Label is being the owner to talk about Jesus and to show Christ. There's another quote that I love. It's like, our job as Christians is to make the invisible visible. And people do that. We do that by people seeing how we love, how Christ-like we are, our character, our nature, all the things that we do brings the invisible visible and tangible for people. And so that's my heart, and my goal is to bring trustworthy and honesty and transparency back to the marketing industry and social media marketing and search engine optimization and all of those things that businesses need to thrive in a digital world, right? There's 8.2 billion people in the world. 4.3 billion of those people are active on social media platforms a day.
Seriously, half.
Yeah. Yep. And so like, we're crazy if we're not doing some form of advertising or marketing online.
It's funny, and I hear you. I didn't grow up with a cell phone. You're probably grew up with a cell phone. My daughters are younger than you. You know, we didn't let them have cell phones early, but yet they're in the digital world. So, yeah, I know kind of what you do, but to be able to do what you do, my brain doesn't work that way. So that's why we love young guys like you that can be creative and understand technology. So what I hear you saying is that if you're in business, you must be on social media.
Yes.
One platform or another, or all.
I would say one. At least one. Yeah.
Oh, at least one, but
yeah, at least one.
Or more.
If you can be on more, great. But here's the deal: is there's so many platforms, and there's so many different. Each platform has its specific thing.
Okay.
And so, what I always recommend to anyone that I work with is let's get good at one before you try to do another one.
What's the first one you start with? If I'm a business owner, where do I start?
Depends on your industry. Service-based business owners, I always say start on Facebook.
Facebook, because is that because it's an older generation than like TikTok or Instagram? Yeah,
Facebook is predominantly older, so I would say you're hitting 30s to 75 on Facebook. Yeah. And generally, if service-based business owners, we're talking like plumbing, landscape, you're targeting homeowners, and you're really not targeting people that are active on Instagram every single day looking at, just reels and just scrolling, or on TikTok just, in a scroll hole. That's not what you're aiming for. You're really looking to connect with an audience. So I say Facebook. Now, don't get me wrong, Instagram and TikTok both have their place. Yeah. But I would say as a starting platform, Facebook is the best platform to start on, and then Instagram, and then TikTok.
Okay, in that order. I love that. I love it. You got a plan. It's a strategy. Okay, all right. Well, talk to me about Black Label Marketing. How'd you come up with the name? What does that mean?
Yeah, Black Label is it's top shelf. Black Label whiskey's top shelf.
Top shelf.
I don't drink it all, but I heard somebody talking about Black Label, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's the top shelf stuff. I want that. That's really good." And I was like, oh, I like that. Black label marketing, like the top shelf of
just
marketing.
Makes sense.
Yeah. You know, I was like, it fit really well. And it sounds good. And I was like, okay, I like this.
So your ideal client is service-based. You love, like Aaron owns a plumbing company. You love that.
Yeah, I love service-based business owners and churches. Yeah, those are my game. So landscape, I would say construction, plumbing, barbers, anybody that offers a service to someone, I am all about it. I think it's amazing. Product marketing is not my gig. I have a couple friends that I recommend that do specific product marketing. But I will definitely work with a company that has products, and I will do their strategy for them.
Right.
But I don't want to create any of their content.
And that's good for you to know that what you're really great at, what you're passionate about, and what you're not, or what you're not really passionate about, you can, refer them on to somebody else. I think that's really, it's loving.
Yeah.
It's kind. It's wise. Because you get to work on what you love to work on and don't work on what you don't love to work on.
Right. And here's the thing is I want to be honest and transparent up front. And so I never want to put somebody in a position where I'm like, I'm just after your money, because I'm not after your money. I'm actually after your heart and hoping that you meet Jesus. But that's a different story. But I want to be transparent and honest. And so if I can't do something, I'm going to tell you I can't do something. Or if you're asking, hey, I want like top-notch professional photography, I'm like, hey, I'm a social media guy. I don't do top-notch professional photography. I will shoot some great photos on my iPhone for you. But I don't have a professional camera that I use. Eventually, one day I would love to be able to do that. But until I expand my team and I have somebody who can take over what I do, that's something that's just not in the cards for me right now. All
right. So you were single after college through all your work stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How did you meet your wife?
Yeah.
That's the $1 million question.
This is such I love my wife so much. She's the best fit for me. I was actually at a point where I didn't think I was ever going to get married. Like I was coming to the end of I am done trying. For the longest time, I was like, well, I'm a pastor. I want to marry a worship leader. And so I was in this relationship with somebody and I was forcing it to work. And I finally came to the end of it and I was like, I'm done. You know what? I know that being married one day is going to happen and I'm just done trying. I don't want to do it anymore. And so I went through this season of like giving it up to God consistently, but I wasn't really giving it up to God. I was always looking like, oh, I wonder if like who could be, I don't know. And so I had a friend who's the worship pastor at my last church. And we were talking in the back room at church and she was like, hey, I'm trying to hook somebody up with this person. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, well, when you find me a wife, let me know. And she actually was like, well, hey, what about Kelly? This is my wife. And I was like, I mean, she's pretty cute. Like, I wouldn't mind. And she just like stopped and looked at me and she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, I think she's cute. And she's like, because I can make this happen. And I was like, listen, if you can make it happen, go for it. But I am not actively like trying. I'm not going to put any effort in unless I know that it's going to be like a hit and that she'll, receive me well. And at this time, keep in mind, I was the youth pastor / assistant pastor at this church. So this was a parent of one of my students. And so I was like, this could be a whole lot of drama and I really don't want that. But anyways, Emily was like, no, I think you should really, really go for it. You should really talk to her. And I was like, listen, I need you to get some sort of confirmation for me that she actually likes me. And so she's like, okay, sweet. She shot her a text. I didn't think she was going to do this like right then and there. And she totally did. And come to find out, my wife actually had a crush on me for the last 8 years I had been at that church. And I had no idea. No idea at all. So during this season, my head pastor had some health problems and he ended up being in the hospital. And this was right around Easter. And so we were, the church I was at was very all about doing plays every year during the Easter time and during the end of the year. And so we're gearing up for this play that my head pastor wrote, but he's in the hospital. I get a phone call and he's like, hey, you are on for Easter. You are running everything because I'm not there. And I'm like, okay, here we go. And so I had a meeting with my wife and I was like, hey, I'm really interested in you and I would love to get to know you, but this is where I'm currently at right now. And our head pastor is out and I'm running everything, and I just don't know how I can like balance all of these things and try to start a new relationship. And even before that happens, I'm like, I need to talk to your daughter because she's in my youth ministry. And if she's not okay with us going down this path, we're not going down this path. Like, her faith and her being inside of the church is more important to me than what this could be right now.
Yeah.
And she like kind of chuckled, and I didn't understand why she chuckled. And she was like, no, I think that's great. And I was like, so can I have your permission to go and ask Julia, our 18-year-old, now currently 18-year-old. And I was like, can I have your permission to go and ask her if that would be okay if you and I start to get to know each other? And she was like, yeah, go ahead. And I was like, okay. So literally that moment, I got up out of the chair. Julia was on the other side of the church. I walked over to her and I was like, hey, I want to ask you a question, and it's okay if this sounds super weird.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I think I really like your mom, and I would love to take her out on a date and get to know her more. And she laughed and she was like, I would love that. I didn't know that the night before this had happened, that Julia actually had a conversation with my wife and was like, Mom, I think it would be really cool if you married my youth pastor.
No way.
Yeah.
What a beautiful thing that you showed the utmost respect for the daughter. To it's just so cool, man. And
yeah,
how God was working through that.
Yeah, and so we went through that whole season, and it was crazy. And my head pastor, he was out for like 2 months. And one of the Sundays, we had one of our other pastors on staff speaking, and I'm sitting in the front row with my girlfriend, my wife, and he sends me a text, and he's like, "Wow, you and Kelly look really close. What's going on there?" And I was like, oh yeah, you haven't been here. And I'm surprised. So Emily is his daughter. And so I'm like, I'm surprised your daughter didn't just tell you. And so I told him, and he was like, oh, he's like, I think that's a perfect fit. And we started dating. 3 months after we started dating, we were engaged, and a year later we were married. Well, 1 day shy of a year. I had a rule where I was like, hey, I want to wait a year before we get married. And she was like, but if we already know that we know, why are we going to wait? And I was like, it's just a rule that I've always had. And we had our venue picked out. And that's a whole different story with how we got blessed with a house. But we had our venue picked out. And then I had some conviction. And I was like, hey, let's not use that venue. So we got all of our money back. And then the place that we were getting married at, they didn't have the date that we wanted, which was exactly a year to the day of when I said, hey, we need to wait a year. And so we ended up having to get married the day before. And so she makes fun of me all the time. She's like, yeah, so your year rule didn't apply because we got married 1 day shy of a year. 1 day soon,
man. You broke your own rule.
Right, yeah.
Well, do you want to unpack the story of how you've been blessed getting a home? Is that important to you?
Yeah, man, this was insane.
Yeah.
So growing up, I watched my parents fight about money all the time. And so when we did marriage counseling, money was the thing that I was so scared to talk about and so scared to move in. And how are we going to make this work? And I even remember my wife and I, before we were married, we had this disagreement about finances. And I looked at her and I was like, I don't want to fight about money. And like, if this is what we're going to do for the rest of our like marriage, I don't want to do it. And that was, I would never recommend anyone saying that, because what she heard is I don't want to get married, which is not what I meant. What I meant was that finances are scary, and I watched my parents fight about it, and that's all they did. And I don't want to do that. And so
you're saying there's a choice whether people fight over money or not.
Absolutely.
And you chose, I'm not gonna.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, we have disagreements, or where mainly me, where I'm like, oh, we could really use this, and I really like convenience, and so we'll buy it, and then we'll have a little bit of buyer's remorse, like maybe we shouldn't have done that. But now that I've had a business, we've been really like financially set and making sure like we budget and that we're doing the right things. And it's been a blessing because we don't fight about it anymore. Yeah. We our thing is we make it work. Yeah. So during this time, we had this venue. It was $5,000, and it was my dream venue. I was upfront from getting married. I was like, I don't want to get married in a church because I spend 99% of my time in the church. And I would love to be like married outside of the church, outside, or like just a really nice like barn type venue. And we found one. It was great. It was $5,000. And I had actually called my dad and I was like, hey, would you be willing to help pitch in some funds for it? We pitched in some funds and he was like, yeah, that sounds great. So we were meeting and kind of planning what we were going to do and how it was going to go. And I had this conviction that was from the Lord that I was like, you are not stewarding your money well. You're going to spend all this money on one day. Not that the day doesn't matter, because the day matters and I'm making a covenant with my wife before the Lord. Yeah. But why are you going to spend $5,000 when your dream is to have a home? And we hadn't have any money saved. Everything we had was going into the wedding. So then I looked at her and I was like, hey, I think we need to let go of this venue. And she was like, okay. And she's like, but are you okay? My wife is not the one that is picky about things and like about what it looks like or what food is there. I'm the picky one in our relationship. Okay. I'm the one like, well, good to know. Yeah, like this looks aesthetically pleasing. I like that. And she's like, I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. And so she was like, are you sure? Like you said you wanted not to get married in a church, but now you're saying you do. I just want to make sure this isn't like pressure that I put on you or anything. And I was like, no, I really feel like this is the Lord. And so somebody had written us some funds for that venue. And I was like, hey, I don't feel like we can keep these. I feel like this is something that we need to give back. And, I was like, I just going to believe that God's going to open up the right door for us and he'll make it work and we'll make up that money some other way. So I called this person and I was like, hey, this person's not a believer. And I was like, hey, I just really feel like this is what God's asking from us. And I have a check for you for the funds because, we really want to save for a house. And so we're going to redo how we're doing our wedding. And this person was like, I like that. I think that's really financially responsible of you. How much money do you need for a down payment? And I was like, well, I mean, we need $30,000. And to be honest, we haven't saved anything. And this person was like, okay, cool. Can you swing by my office and I'll write you a check for $30,000. And I was like, what? What? And they're like, $30,000. I'll write you a check. Just come and get it. And I was like, are you sure? Like, you don't have to. And he's like, no, I'm sure. I want to do this for you. And so we closed on our house 2 weeks before we got married.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. You can't make that stuff up. I mean, God gives provision in every, he cares about everything about us.
Yes.
Every detail. Sometimes we think, it's just a small detail. Nope. I mean, and that to me, buying a house is a big deal.
Yeah.
Getting married is a big deal. But God still provides.
Absolutely.
According to his plan.
Absolutely. And I think my wife and I, we worked really hard during this season. So again, I'm a youth pastor, right? And I know that kids are watching other people get in relationships, and even other people in the church get in relationships, and they're having sex before they're married and all of these things. And my wife and I had very strict rules. Yeah. I was like, hey, I'm leaving your house by 11 every night. Like, we're not going to be in spaces alone together. Like, if we're in the car going on a date, like, yeah, okay. But like, we're not going to be in somebody's house or in a bedroom alone, any of that. Like, I modeled not for two of my girls. I was able to model, like, this is how a man really loves a woman.
Man, come on.
And kind of gave them that. So this is what you look for in a husband and a person that you're going to date. Yeah. Are they going to love you enough?
Right. The Bible verse that, I often go to, this is maybe my verse in 2022. It says, honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. And then probably a year later, I was like, Lord, I need to know what else it is I need to learn. And so I went and met with this guy. I would call him one of my mentors. And I was praying, Lord, what do you want me to learn? And I think what I hear from you is this verse is, even though honor is important, humility precedes honor. And when God sees your humility going, giving back the money, being transparent, trying to be a good steward, God honors that. I mean, you can't, 5,000 doesn't equal 30,000, right? Last time I checked. God's math is different than our earthly math. So I think there's something to humility. And I think that's what God saw in you is humility.
And here's the deal is I was super cocky and arrogant. And you can ask my wife, like that was when she first met me, she was like, yeah, you were very cocky and arrogant. And I had to go through a season of being humbled and keeping my pride in check. You know, and this was a huge blessing. And for us, it was one of those defining moments in faith. You know, as believers, we have a bunch of different defining moments, but this is one of those moments I'm like, man, this was undeniably the Lord. There is no way anyone would just be like, yeah, let me hand over this. Yeah, and not only that same person gave us another $30,000 on our wedding day. Yeah. Hey, we know you just bought a house and finances are probably pretty tight and you're going to go on your honeymoon. We want you to save half of this and then use whatever else you need to do and just have a good honeymoon. And so we paid off debt and then went on our honeymoon and had a blast.
Wow. Well, I realize you're only 2 years into marriage, but I'm going to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Who mentors you to be a great husband?
I have a lot of people that I allow to speak into my life that are I very firmly believe in whenever I'm going through something, I'm going to 3 people that are more spiritually mature than I am before I make a really big decision. And probably the biggest influence in my life and in my marriage was my head pastor of my last church, Kevin Lane. And I look at his marriage with his wife, and I'm like, I want that.
Okay.
They are so in love with each other. And he has been a dad to me for the last 8 years.
Yeah.
He calls me his adopted son.
I love it.
You know, and even though we're not at the same church anymore and we parted ways in church, we're still very close and we talk all the time. And he's my guy. He's the guy that really pours into me. And then obviously John David as well, who I'm getting ready to plant a church with. He's a brother that's so close. And we walk through the last year and a half, we've walked through life together. He was there through transition and struggles and adding a new baby into our life. And we're really close with him and his family.
Would you say that most men don't have mentors?
Absolutely.
That they just all figure it out. They try to do it on their own. Would you say that's true?
100%.
How's that working out?
I think it's horrible.
It's a horrible plan.
Yeah.
Dude, I love your plan. You don't just have one. You've got 3 specific people.
Yep.
Older, more mature than you in the Lord. Not that you aren't as mature, but your humility is like somebody who's been walking along farther and longer than you have.
Absolutely.
Man, I think if guys would just adopt that, go to men who can speak life into you to help you make better decisions. Because guys, oftentimes we make, emotional decisions and they're not always good.
Absolutely.
Right?
Guilty. That.
Guilty as charged. I've been being mentored by men I came to know the Lord probably when I was 28, give or take. I didn't know any Bible verses. Yeah. But I learned early on that I need to show up and be mentored by men. I need to hang out with guys like you that can speak life into me. And I would say for my marriage, people are like, what's the answer? Well, obviously, loving my wife as Christ loved the church, yes. But how do I do that on a daily basis? Well, it's being around guys. Like almost every morning of every week, I am with a guy somewhere, talking about the Lord, and it never gets old. And guess what? God's still working in my life. Like, come on. I haven't arrived. You haven't arrived. Got to keep showing up. So 3 guys. Who's your 3 guys? That's the question of the day, man.
So right now, Kevin Lane, John David, and Rob Yannicke. Okay. So Rob is the co-lead pastor at my current church. Yeah. And I love that man. So good.
And then are you also in Bible study?
Yeah. So I run a Bible study. Okay. We're actually taking a break for the summer, but I run a Bible study Monday mornings at 7 a.m. And then I'm getting my credentialing through the assemblies right now. Yeah. And then I also am a nationally certified biblical counselor.
I was going to say, you are a biblical counselor. That was really one of my notes is,
yep.
When did you get certified?
during the end of COVID, Salem Heights offers a class to get certified nationally for biblical counseling through the Association of Biblical Counselors. And so I went through that class, passed the test, got certified, and now I counsel some people. I counsel a couple people in Florida. I have a couple guys here that I meet with that I counsel to. And then also I'm super active in discipleship. I have a heart for discipleship and discipling people. And so I have a couple guys that I've been discipling for like the past 6 years. And we don't meet as often as we should. Some of them live out of state. And so we're phone calls, or when they do come into town, we make sure we grab coffee and we spend, a few hours together. And then I actually just, there's a new guy that I met in town that he's a pastor at a church, and he is going through some stuff. And so he was like, hey man, I just need somebody to speak into my life and just.
You're the guy.
Yeah. And I was like, dude, I'm here for it. Let's go.
Come on. Don't you love that God gives you opportunity every single day to meet, influence, disciple, mentor, share?
Yep. I read a book a long time ago, and it was called Assimilation, and it's about the church and the guest services portion of a church. And the quote that stuck out to me the most from that book was, every person that you encounter is a gift from God. And so I have put that into my life now. So when I'm at the coffee shop, or I'm, the person that takes my order for the coffee, you're a gift from God. How can I impact you today?
Wow.
And even when I was in Florida, something that, so my wife and I, we go to Florida. That's where we had our honeymoon. We go every year. And we were there this last time, and there was, we were out at dinner at this place called the Fishing Hole. There was this guy at this table, and he was with his family. And the waitress comes over, and he's like, hey, we're going to pray a blessing over our meal. Is there anything that we can pray for you for? And I was just like, man, why haven't I thought about that? It's not like putting somebody on the spot. It's not like, hey, what do you need prayer for? But it's like, hey, we're already doing this. And we just want to invite you into it. And then she was like, no, I'm okay. And he's like, okay. And he's like, well, hey, can we pray that you just have a good day and you make some more tips? And she was like, yeah, actually, that would be really great. I could use the money. And he's like, oh, so there's a financial thing. Well, let me pray a financial blessing over you. And I was like, I was like, that's so good. This guy was just naturally on it. And I was like, yeah, dude, I need that. Need to do that.
Well, have you met Tim Davis?
Of course.
So Tim is one of those guys, I met him 15, 20 years ago. And the thing about Tim, me and Tim and Sven Anderson, we would go out for coffee 20 years ago, and we still meet for coffee and we still do ministry together. But Tim will do it every single time when we're out. Hey, what's the greatest challenge in your life? That's his number one question. And then how can I pray for you? But he's always asking that question. What's your greatest challenge? And people, waitresses, waiters, whoever, it's funny that they actually go, you know what? I'm glad you asked. Here's what I'm going through. I'm going through divorce, bankruptcy, life, whatever. People have burdens, man.
Yeah.
And I think if we don't stop and really forget me, let's go pray for people and go love on people and just encourage and challenge people.
Yep. Agreed. That's so good. I love Tim. He's such a good guy.
Heart for the Lord. And well, hey, brother, we are going to wrap up. A couple things. I noticed you have some tattoos.
Yes, sir.
Give me the story on your tattoos. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Man, I have a lot. I have scripture. I have Ephesians 2:10, Psalms 27:4, Galatians 2:20. Then almost everything on my body is scripture related. Lion of Judah on my hand with a crown. I have Jesus' story right here in the crevice of my arm. Compass for direction. My grandma, who I was really close with on my mom's side, she passed away. And so I have a couple roses here, and then one on my hand with her birth date on it. I'm also a super nerd, and I love all things nerdy. And so I grew up in, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but I grew up in the Harry Potter era. So I have a Harry Potter tattoo on my arm. So I know there's people give me flack for it, but I love it. And I can argue very strong Christian themes in Harry Potter, even though that there is wizarding and witchcraft in it. I can argue some very strong themes in that.
Well, sometimes it's topic for conversation, like my sin doesn't save people, but it does share a story. Like God saved me from my sin. And my past is my past. And I think God works for all things.
Absolutely.
I think Romans chapter 8 talks about, how he does work through all things for those who love him and called to according to his purpose.
Absolutely.
But, God called us to be creative. He created you. And I realize we're creative beings. And sometimes we live in fear because we're afraid of what people say or think about us. But to actually be authentically you, I love that, dude. It's awesome.
And I would beg to say, and this is a church thing. As a pastor, I feel like this is huge, but there is a 20th century church model. Wow. And that model is a lot of perfectionism. You have to be perfect. You have to look like this. And the 21st century church, where we are at now, is people just crave authenticity. Who are you? Why do you do the things that you do? And I want to know that you're not perfect. And
hallelujah.
I think that is beautiful. And we as believers have to do that. These tattoos have been such a great reminder, not only for myself, but also a great and easy way to open conversation with people in the alternative community who may not feel like they belong in a church because they like to wear black or have piercings or have tattoos all over their body. And it's been a great, easy way for me to be like, well, dude, I'm a pastor and I'm tatted out. Yeah. So is my wife.
You know what? It's awesome. Well, let's wrap up with this here. So if somebody wants to reach out to you, learn about Black Label Marketing to help their service business, or whatever it is you guys would line up, how do they get a hold of you and just connect with you?
Yeah, so you can reach out to me. I have a form on my website, so www.blacklabelmarketingonline.com. My business phone is also my cell phone number, which is 707-386-7706. Give me a call. If you just want to meet for coffee and you need prayer, I'm also here for that. Man. I would love to do that.
And I would agree that's 1,000% true, because when I showed up with you for coffee, it was just like, it was... very comfortable. I mean, you're a great guy. You're easy to talk to, and you're willing to actually educate me on some stuff too, business-wise, which I thought was cool. But I think you have a real heart for people. So,
thank you. I appreciate it.
We're going to wrap up, but thank you for listening each week. We really appreciate you. If you ever want to be on the podcast or know somebody that does, please reach out, man. We'd love to have a conversation, interview them to see if it does make sense, and share your story. And then lastly, first of all, I want to say thanks to Chris for coming on the podcast. That was awesome. I read a book over my vacation. I just got back from vacation, but called Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. And I think one of the verses he quoted in there, at least it led me to this verse, was Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Now there's more. I'm not going to go into that, but the question is, the Lord is my shepherd. Is that true in your life? Because sometimes I want and desire lots of things, but do I desire the Lord? That would be the question. So, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with that, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for being here, and thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah.